Hey guys, welcome to week 8 of the James Bible study. We're going to be talking about worldliness and godliness today. We're going to be talking about how those things are separate and that you can't have both at the same time. And so we're going to start off by reading a verse in James, which is James 4:1, which says, "What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you?" And so what is that talking about is that as Christians, we should have a desire to be free of sin. But sometimes we can get bogged down in the worldliness and feel stuck in our ways. We can feel at war with ourselves because we desire to grow closer to God, but part of us may desire the things of the world. When we know what we are doing is sinful, we should feel convicted. We should feel guilty of what we've done, but we can't get out of our ways alone. We need the help of God. And so really that's the thing that we're going to be really hitting on through this lesson is that, we all have sin in our lives and we all have these things that we struggle with and these things that we just can't seem to get over. And what won't help with that is our own methods. We're not going to be able to get over it ourselves. We need to rely on God to help us through it. Romans 7:15 says, "I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate." Now, this is a really interesting verse because what Paul is saying here is something we all should relate to. We hate that we have sin in our lives, but we can't seem to get rid of it when we try. And that's because we can't rely on ourselves because of our sinful nature, because of the way we are as humans and the sinful nature that we've had throughout the course of human history. We can't get rid of the things in our lives that we struggle with without the help of God. But the interesting thing to focus on here is that, it's this comparison that's really neat about we're doing the things that we should hate to do. We should hate sin. We should hate the sinful things in our lives. So it's interesting that these things that we're doing are things that directly violate what we know is wrong, what we know is not okay, and we do them anyway. And that's because of sin's hold on us because of our sinful nature as, just people in this world. And that's what Christ does for us he frees us from those bonds of sin and allows us to leave that old life behind and move on to better things, living a more Christ-like life and having a stronger faith in God. So relying on God is something that everyone struggles with because we know that He is awesome and mighty. Like those things that we talk about in church when we worship God and we sing songs to Him. We talk about how great He is. But then when we actually try to do things on our own, when we try to do things, we continuously try to do them on our own without the help and guidance of God, which only ever results in failure. So Romans 12:2 says, and this is what answers this, is, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." So to get rid of our sinful ways, we have to trust in God's guidance and direction. We have to pray that He will show us the way to live and use His word as our guidebook. So that's what the Bible's here for, is direction. And that's what we can pray to God for, is guidance and answers to life's big questions and our questions of where will we go, how do I separate myself from the world? How do I get rid of these things in my life that I don't want anymore? But what that doesn't mean is that we're free from having to do any work. James 4:7 says, "Submit yourself therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." So we need God's strength and guidance to resist sin, but He is only giving us the directions. We have to actually follow the path. God is the GPS. We're the person driving our car, truck, whatever. He will tell us what to do if we ask Him for it, but we have to actually make the decision to turn that way. So how do we avoid sin and resist the devil? Step 1 is what we've already talked about, which is praying for guidance and reading the Bible. Those things provide answers and the path that we need to take. But the rest of what we have to do falls on us, though. If you know that doing a certain thing or going to a certain place normally results in you sinning, then that is something we have to cut out of our lives. You need to, if you know that going to hang out with this certain friend is going to result in you doing things that you shouldn't be doing, or going to whatever location it is where all the stuff goes down. If you know that those places are what leads to this, that is what you have to remove. You have to remove yourself from those situations and sometimes from those people, because you know what you're doing is wrong. And that's where the hard part comes in. That's where the work is on us. You are always going to be tempted to sin no matter where you are, but if you can get rid of the things you know hurt you and bring you down and drag you back into the world, you will be one step closer to leading a more Christ-like life. So realizing that you can be solid in your faith while continuing to do things that go directly against, I read that wrong. Realizing that you can't be solid in your faith while continuing to do things that go directly against God is an important part of our walk with Christ. So when we come to that state of awareness where we're like, I can't keep doing this, and go and say I'm like strong in my faith and I have a firm foundation and everything, but I continue to fall into the same pitfall over and over again, we have to realize that that isn't okay to keep falling into that trap, to keep falling into that hole. We have to, with God's help, pull ourselves out of those situations and those things so that we can grow stronger in our faith with God. So James 4:4 says, "You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." So the key word here is adulterous. When we hear that, you probably think about the Ten Commandments. And in that context, it's talking about, not cheating on your spouse or partner or whatever. And that is, what it means in that instance. But this word appears again here. And in this context, it's a really good metaphor for our relationship with God, because we are in a relationship with God when we become Christians. It's not, of course, it's not romantic. It's not like, oh, we're dating God. That's not how this works, of course. But our God is a jealous God. He wants us all to himself, totally devoted to him. So when we cling on to the sins that we don't want to let go of, we are, quote unquote, cheating on God. We are going away from him and doing the things that we want to do and going with the people that we know put us in bad situations, or the places that do the same thing. When we choose to fall into those same traps over and over again, then we are cheating on God. We're going against the fact that he wants us to himself. He wants us devoted to him so that we can do his work in the world, and that so ultimately we can be with him when this life is over. So why would we give ourselves to the world is the real question, because we do it every day. The worldliness that we're talking about is like anything that is related to sin and the things that drag us down and the things that can, if we do them, it could pull other believers down with us. All those things, that's worldliness. That's being of this world. And we're not called to be that. So, but why should we want to do that when the world is just shallow, superficial, and will one day cease to exist? This world is temporary, so why are we devoting our time and our effort and even our worship sometimes, if we, hold these idols of the things that we want to do or that we shouldn't want to do, when we idolize those things? Why should we give that to the world when we can give it to God, who created us and who redeemed us and gave us an opportunity to be with him for an eternity? Why should we want, when you really think about it, it is insane to think why we would give our time and attention to the world when we could give it to the creator of all things and the person who, gave us all that we have, who blessed us with everything that we have in our life and is there for us every day. And that's just really something to consider when we look at this, is just how amazing God is in comparison to the world. And one of the pitfalls that we often is because we can't see him. And that's the thing, is like, as Christians, we have that evidence in our life. Even though we can't see God, we can't shake his hand, that He is real and He is there for us. So we can't let the worldly logic of, oh, it's not there, he can't, he's, if we haven't seen Him and we can't touch Him, it's obviously not real. We can't let that worldly logic drag us away from our faith, because that is where faith comes into play. It's believing something that you can't prove. And because if you could prove it, then it wouldn't be faith. And so when we get into this, that can be the difficulty of putting our trust and giving ourselves to God, is that we have doubts. But the ultimate thing is that as Christians, we should know that God is real and that He has placed evidence in our lives of His presence. And so we should want to give ourselves to Him because of what He's done for us and because of just how great, mighty, and awesome He is. And so to finish up, our prayer should be a confession of sin to God, an admittance of our dependence on Him. So the fact that we need Him in our lives to get us away from these things that we struggle with. We have to have God for this to work. And an expression of our love for Him because of how great and wonderful He is to us. He loves us so much. And sometimes we don't return that same love. And that's what we should pray that we can get better at. We need to show God the love, to try to match the love that God shows for us to Him. And as we go out into the world, our prayer should also be that God shows us how to separate ourselves from the world, be more like Him, lead a more Christ-like life, and for the strength to resist temptation, because that's where it starts, is that temptation. So our prayer should be to resist that, resist the devil, and, try to lead a more Christ-like life and grow closer with Him. And so that's all I have for today, and I thank you guys for tuning in. I think this video is a little bit shorter than usual, but this was a pretty quick lesson, and I'll look forward to seeing you back week 9. All right, bye guys.